The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 11th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble, because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble, because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at the home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When Martha had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping. He was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd that is standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
The raising of Lazarus from the dead is, of course, one of the perfect gospels for us to study during Lent. Because after all, God is all about new life. God is all about transfiguration. God is all about resurrection. God is all about change, transformation, and renewal. So, of course, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense for us to read from Ezekiel about the dry bones in the desert. It makes perfect sense for us to read about Lazarus. There's a few things we need to know as we read this gospel. Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. First of all, we all know that when Mary and Martha complained that there's going to be this terrible stench, that they're right. He's been dead in this hot tomb, closed up for 4 days. More importantly, there was a belief amongst the Jews in that time that it took 3 days for the soul, the spirit, to leave the dead person. This was the 4th day. In theory, according to Jewish tradition, according to the Pharisees, Lazarus' body was not only dead, but his spirit was gone. So when Jesus says, "Open the tomb," everybody gathered there is thinking there is no hope. It's beyond 3 days. His spirit is long gone. So Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. We all know this story. We hear it every year. We celebrate it every year. Jesus performing his greatest of all miracles, raising Lazarus literally out of the tomb to new life. And that's what we need to focus on. That Jesus' reach even extends into the tomb, the grave, the absolute darkest place in the universe, the absolute most isolated place in the universe. The tomb is the thing we all fear the absolute most in this world. And Jesus' reach and ability to create new life even extends into the tomb. Think about that for a moment. Of course, we all know where this is heading. We have the gift of hindsight. We know what's coming. We know that Jesus himself is going to end up in that same tomb, and that he himself is going to raise from the dead, remove the stone, and defeat death once and for all. But here's the thing that is so important to each of us. We now know that the reach of Christ extends into the thing we feared the most, the grave. We now know that when we get there someday, and we all will, that Jesus is there to take us to new life. The fear, at some level, is removed. Even the tomb has become a place of new life in God's kingdom. That truly is a miracle. That truly is amazing. That God wants to turn the worst things in the world into instruments of new life. That God will take a cross, an instrument of gruesome death, and make it into a symbol of resurrection. That God will take a tomb, the place where darkness reigns and life ends, and turn it into a place in which resurrection occurs. How amazing is that? The things we fear the most, and God is there. God is there. Never, ever, ever removed from God's reach. It's remarkable. It's amazing. This is the grace of Lent. Of course, we also have the visual from Ezekiel, the desert. Another place we all fear. Another place filled with death, dryness, isolation, bones. And here, too, God creates new life. And that ultimately is the whole point here. There is nothing, there is nowhere that we can ever end up that is beyond God's reach. There is nowhere we can ever go that is beyond new life and resurrection. There is nowhere in the universe where God's grace doesn't come alive for us. Even in the desert, even in the tomb, even in isolation and darkness, God's grace and renewal is living. These truly are remarkable stories. And it tells us something, the most important thing we always need to remember, that God's desire for us is always new life and renewal. That's our purpose. That's our divine calling. We're not meant to simply live and then die. We're meant to be renewed and resurrected and transfigured into new life all the time. That is God's calling for us. That is God's divine purpose for us. New life. And thus we have hope. We always have hope. We know that no matter what we face, no matter how we suffer, no matter what we fear, that God's divine purpose for us ultimately is renewal. There's our hope. That God reaches into deserts, that Christ reaches into tombs, and that every instrument, every place that represents death and isolation is a place where God's grace brings new life. We have hope. We have a promise. We have a God who loves us so much that he will never, ever, ever allow us to die. Truly is amazing. Thanks be to God.